And here it is, history made. A personal support worker in Toronto receiving the very first COVID-19 vaccine in Ontario.
I'm excited.
Yeah, why?
Because I'm the first one to get the vaccine.
She and 4 other colleagues immunized yesterday, kicking off the largest immunization campaign in Canadian history. All 5 work at the Rakai nursing home, where 19 residents died during a COVID-19 outbreak in the first wave. 6,000 doses of Pfizer's vaccine arrived Sunday night. Around 2,500 healthcare workers will be first to get those shots, with the province storing half so that they are prepared to get the second vaccine, which is needed 21 days later. While this step shows a light at the end of the tunnel, some healthcare workers stress we still have a long road ahead.
That you'll remember, less than a year ago, no one believed it would be possible to get this vaccine out. And now, thanks to basic science and thanks to the collaboration with the commercial enterprise like Pfizer and BioNTech, here we are today, breaking the back of this horrible virus. So
the fact that people got vaccinated today has made no difference to my work in the ICU and in the hospital, and I don't think it's going to have an impact on what we see on the ground for several months. So I think it's great news, but it shouldn't distract us from the task at hand, and the task at hand is to get COVID under control.
Now, coming up here, Colette Cameron, a registered nurse and executive director at the Rakai Long-Term Care Center. She's going to be joining us to continue the discussion, I should say, about what this means for our frontline workers, and that is coming up at 7:30.
Okay.
Meantime, a woman living in a long-term care home was also among the first in Canada to receive a vaccine. The Quebec health minister said Gisèle Levesque rolled up her sleeve at 11:30 yesterday morning, making the 89-year-old the first person in Canada to get the vaccine, around a half hour before the vaccine was administered in Toronto. Coming up here at 6:30, we're going to be talking to Dr. Samantha Hill, president of the Ontario Medical Association, joining us to answer your questions about the vaccine. There are a number of questions I'm sure you have as it begins to roll out across the country. Meanwhile, let's get to Peel Region now. 33 tickets handed out over the weekend in connection to social gatherings. We told you about that number yesterday. And now the manager of compliance and licensing enforcement in Mississauga telling CityNews reporter Shauna Hunt that you can expect officers out monitoring holiday celebrations.
Non-compliance at this stage with the amount of messaging and education we've done. The tolerance level is pretty low when we see 10 or 12 people at a residence for a gathering.
He says 126 charges have been laid since lockdown began at the end of November. Infectious disease experts warn January could be concerning if people don't stick to their own households over the holidays, especially those living in lockdown zones. And Toronto Mayor John Tory expressing frustrations with Torontonians who are not taking this lockdown in Toronto seriously enough to stop the spread.
I ask those who are not taking this as seriously as they might, or who know someone who's not taking this as seriously as they might, what would they be thinking at this moment if I was sitting here as mayor telling you that 14 people had been lost to fire deaths, or 14 people had been lost to criminal activity, or to collisions involving cars and pedestrians and cyclists?
Tory upset with stories of some bars opening over the weekend. Enforcement teams laid 6 charges under the Reopening Ontario Act. The mayor also asking people not to take part in their traditional Christmas gatherings to help stop the spread. Meantime, remember this, Adamson BBQ, which defied provincial lockdown orders last month? Well, it will be allowed to reopen for takeout and delivery, but first has to get a business license. It was closed and owner Adam Skelly arrested back in November after the Etobicoke restaurant allowed indoor dining for several days. Skelly faces several charges, including mischief and obstructing police. The 33-year-old is out on $50,000 bail, is prohibited from going to his restaurant. Indoor dining has not been allowed in Toronto since October the 10th. Let's give you an update on education now. All high school students in the York Catholic District School Board switching to remote learning for the last 3 days of this week. The board says a cohort flip for the current quadmester, it was set to take place tomorrow. But since it's happening just before the Christmas break and York Region is now in lockdown, they've made it entirely remote so that students and staff will not be exposed to additional contacts. The cohort flip will take place, but it's now going to be done remotely. So the court's now in appearance today for 2 security guards charged in the death of a female patient at Toronto General Hospital. We've been following this story for some time. The security guards at this hospital had an altercation with 43-year-old Danielle Stephanie Warner. And this was back on May the 11th. She went into physical distress and later died May 27th. A coroner's report found Warner died in a brain injury, which is consistent with restraint asphyxia after a violent struggle. And surveillance video partially captured the altercation, but the camera purposely turned away. 42-year-old Amanda Rojas Silva and 35-year-old Shane Hutley facing manslaughter and criminal negligence causing death charges.